Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Milena. I am a psychotherapist working with an ABL Health, and we would like to welcome you to today's webinar on weight stigma and the introduction to health at every size, which will be presented by me and Amy, who is with me today. Amy, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Amy. I'm a nutritionist and I work across the virtual groups here at ABL. So I'll be speaking to you about HAES in the second part of the session today. So really excited to get to that.
Thank you, Amy. Right, so very welcome again. And I suppose before we go into the webinar itself, as I said, if you want to ask us any questions, drop the message in the Q&A box, which is on the bottom of your screen. And today's session is going to be divided into two parts. I will start with some kind of conversations about weight stigma, some information for you, and then we'll move on to talking about health at every size, which Amy will be presenting on. And hopefully at the end, there might be some questions that we can answer, so you're welcome to kind of drop us a message. As a disclaimer, I will be using the word fat and people living in large bodies as a neutral descriptor or used by fat activists to kind of describe people living in large bodies. And of course, the word obesity might be used in this webinar, but to clarify, this is a medical understanding of the word, which also carries certain stigma. However, I of course understand that this might not be the preferred way for many, and you have maybe never heard of these terms or the way they are being used in here. So just wanted to kind of also introduce that to you and reassure you that this webinar is going to be using the weight inclusive language. So I hope this also offer you some learning about what is your own preferred language to describe large bodies. Okay, so before just bear with me, here it is. So this whole webinar today, the primary aim of it is to increase awareness about the concept of health at every size, but we cannot really go into health at every size before actually maybe kind of speaking about weight stigma first, because this is kind of a very crucial part of health at every size, and this is how the whole approach started. We needed to kind of look into weight stigma and introduce this to you. I suppose many individuals may not be familiar with HAES and it's of course its principles. So the presentation should offer you very much that kind of introduction and familiarization with yourself with this approach. So what we will do, we will start off with kind of raising awareness of weight stigma and health at every size. We're here to challenge some of that weight stigma, and I will show you some of the consequences of weight stigma and how it also plays out in the society. We're here to promote health and well-being and provide evidence-based information and address common concerns and misconception about HAES. And there's quite a lot of them. So again, just to kind of give you, I suppose, a bit of a taster into what that all means and what information kind of is circulating out there. And we're here, of course, as I just mentioned earlier, and we're here to encourage a very compassionate language and practices, kind of, I suppose, connected to weight and its self-health. Okay, so starting off with what is weight stigma? Okay, so weight stigma refers to the negative attitudes, beliefs, and stereotypes that are directed towards individuals based on their body weight or size. It can manifest in various forms, including discrimination, bias, bullying, and of course, social exclusion. And as you can see on the little picture here, I've got on the screen that weight stigma can affect two kind of major aspects of our life, which is mental and physical well-being. Mental well-being, weight stigma can definitely help, obviously kind of cause us to feel quite depressed. It can affect our low self-esteem. It can sort of increase the risk of substance abuse. And of course, cortisol levels can increase as well. We can actually end up with elevated blood pressure and a lot of stress that kind of is affecting our bodies when we are being affected by weight stigma. And we know that the prevalence of weight stigma is a complex and multifaceted issue, but it is unfortunately widespread in many societies. So starting off with kind of a very big area where weight stigma is quite present, which is the healthcare settings. In healthcare settings, weight stigma can lead to biased treatment, misdiagnosis, and inadequate care. And studies have shown that healthcare professionals often hold very negative attitudes towards individuals with higher body weights, which can result in delayed or substandard care. This stigma can discourage individuals from seeking medical help, leading to negative health outcomes, because a lot of us who go to the doctors and we live in a large body, we sometimes are being prescribed weight loss above the care that we actually need. So some of you might have an experience of seeking medical help and being told that's because of your weight. So this is very important to take away from this, that sometimes our care is not being prioritized. The whole issue of BMI and body mass index has obviously some background in racism, as well as, of course, stigmatization of bodies. BMI itself is a mathematical formula invented by a mathematician, not a doctor, in 1800s, and has been used by health providers since then as a way of measuring health. However, it is not an adequate measurement of health. Because when you think about, for example, a rugby player who will go into sort of kind of measure their BMI, they perhaps will actually score very high on the BMI, but actually you're not looking at the body composition or their actual health. And as an athlete, they might be quite healthy or quite sort of, fit to be able to perform quite well, as opposed to maybe someone who again might have kind of a larger, bigger size. So it's really kind of important to kind of understand the issue of BMI, how stigmatizing that can also be. And we obviously know that there is a little bit more movement towards BMI, kind of moving away from BMI, but we know that something still very present, especially in our health system in the UK. Weight loss is very much overprescribed for many conditions, and very little scientific evidence is held whether these conditions would improve. And we can say that we can improve our health in various ways, and our bodies may or may not change in response to these changes. And we see that weight-inclusive practitioners look at the underlying cause of overall health disparities. And we can promote health behaviors and see improvement in labs, dietary quality, energy, physical activity, and well-being without having to focus on individuals' weight. Higher body weights have been associated with negative health outcomes through correlational studies. However, correlation is not causation, and there is very little evidence that the weight actually caused these health outcomes. Being critical of research is imperative to continue to improve our methods so that our knowledge can truly evolve and grow. In fact, there is evidence that weight stigma and weight cycling have strong relationships to diseases that are often blamed on body size. And there is zero studies that show that intentional weight loss is sustainable. Randomized controlled trials following participants in dieting and non-dieting groups consistently demonstrate that the great majority of the dieters gain all the weight back plus usually a little bit more on top. So dieting has been shown to cause harm by encouraging weight cycling, very much disordered eating, and reinforcing weight stigma. So fat people are humans and deserve respect and healthcare. This is where it all starts. If you're struggling with this idea, if you think that it might be reasonable for fat people to become thinner before they deserve full access to healthcare, and research and lived experience tell us that you are definitely not alone, then it's time to do some work to unpack and dismantle your own weight stigma and bias. So moving to a paradigm that seeks to support the health of fat people rather than trying to make them thin is something that is largely achievable now. To be truly weight inclusive will take a lot more time and work, and it's about realizing everything that we do, that we don't have, in terms of caring for higher weight clients and higher weight patients. And of course, it requires an understanding of how much of the research that forms the basis of things like medical or surgical best practices, medication dosing, durable medical equipment, creation in its own, is based very much on thin bodies. So currently what we have is a healthcare system that was made for thin people and excludes, and is sometimes in a very hostile way, excludes fat people. So fixing that requires very much a commitment to change, requires research that comes from a perspective of supporting the health of fat people, rather than trying to eradicate existing fat people and prevent more, of course, from existing. And it requires creating and very much purchasing the right equipment and tools that support higher weight bodies. And of course, this level is about commitment to creating a healthcare that is inclusive and equally accessible to people of all sizes, and realizing that there is also similar work to be done around those with other marginalized and multiple marginalized identities. So healthcare system sometimes can create, obviously, quite a lot of obstacle for us to get the right care. Weight stigma in education. So we can see that weight stigma is also very much prevalent in educational settings, where fat students may face bullying, teasing, and social exclusion from their peers. And this can have a significant impact on their self-esteem, academic performance, and overall well-being. Weight stigma in the workplace. This is quite important as well, because this can contribute to hiring biases, lower wages, and limited job opportunities for individuals with higher body weights. This discrimination can affect career advancement and overall job satisfaction. Weight stigma in the media. So the media, of course, plays a significant role in perpetuating weight stigma through the promotion of unrealistic beauty standards. And we can see that the portrayal of overweight individuals is quite negative and a lot of the time quite stereotypical. And this can further reinforce societal biases and contribute to body dissatisfaction and low self-esteem. So exposure to weight-biased media content, such as over-representing thin individuals, using weight-related humor, and spreading misinformation about causes of weight and obesity can really reinforce negative attitudes within the society. So public health, mass media campaigns, for example, can also perpetuate stigmatization and amplify the risk of unhealthy behaviors through the use of anti-fat rhetoric. So exposure to content that very much is quite negative and negatively frames fat people over the years through research was associated with stronger beliefs in the health risk, weight, and personal responsibility, and increased dislike of larger bodies. So similarly, framing obesity as a public health crisis in the news reporting increased anti-fat attitudes, while exposure to very much more fat positive and again positive frames generally shifted anti-fat attitudes and beliefs related to overweight and obesity causation in a positive direction more than exposure to fat negative frames. So every now and then, I'm sure you'll see that in the media programs or through news, the rhetoric of shifting responsibility on the individual, which is quite interesting when you think about it. Because of kind of recent report, well, recent within the last 10 or so years ago, there was a report called Foresight, which has been commissioned by the government, by Public Health England, and has highlighted to the government in this country that there is around 100 factors that contribute to weight, which include, of course, genetic, environmental, access to food, psychological factors, and highlighted to the government and asked them to stop pushing the discourse around responsibility taking. However, this has not stopped the government, unfortunately. We've seen kind of recent development, especially with the putting calories on menus, which again shifts the responsibility on the individual and kind of really requests them to make the informed choice, which is quite dangerous, quite difficult to sort of kind of deal, especially for people who have been dealing with a lot of eating disorders. And one of the kind of, when you think about media and how media presents fat people or people living in large bodies, a lot of the time these characters are maybe quite funny or pictured in a way that kind of obviously kind of make people feel sorry for them, or maybe kind of are laughable. There is this kind of depiction of the good fatty. And for example, as I've got it here on the slide, the fat suit used in movies and TV series to again show the transformation of the character. And Monica from Friends or Brendan Fraser in the movie Whale, which just recently I think got an Oscar or something like that. So you can see that there's something about fat people being pictured in a very negative light or a laughable light, and that's quite wrong. There is very little productions or media pictures that shows quite neutral and good representation of people living in larger bodies. So moving on, consequences of weight stigma. We've got physical health consequences. Weight stigma can have adverse effects on physical health. It might lead to avoidance of healthcare services, delayed or inadequate medical treatment, and poor health outcomes. A lot of people are terrified to go to the doctors because of the fact that you're being afraid to be pushed away, to be told that you are lying or you're not, it's not true, that you are in pain, or you maybe kind of are using the doctors to sort of, just rely on obviously that healthcare. So it is kind of really highlighting kind of the wrongdoing as well of it. And a lot of people, because they avoid healthcare, we can see that kind of increase of deaths during obviously of deaths of larger people because of that kind of denial of access to healthcare. And people who experience weight stigma are less likely to engage in physical activity due to the fear of judgment or discrimination, which can contribute to a sedentary lifestyle and associated health issues. The fact that we are so frowned upon, we are being sort of pushed away because we live in larger bodies, is making us so self-conscious to go out there, to go for a jog or go to the gym or enjoy our whatever exercise or whatever movement you want to do. And this is very important for us to also make sure that we fight that, we stand against that, because even if you're living in a large body, you've got to be present in the society. And if this, whatever I'm talking about, makes you feel angry, that's good, because that anger needs to be also kind of let out. And we need to voice it, that actually there's a lot of wrongdoing done to people living in larger bodies. Mental health implications. weight stigma takes a toll on individuals' mental well-being. It can lead to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, body dissatisfaction, and disordered eating behaviors. And of course, weight-based teasing, bullying, and discrimination can also increase the risk of developing eating disorders, such as binge eating. And of course, we currently see body oppression, which is the effect of being bullied, being kind of pushed away, being sort of rejected from the society. We see that as trauma. And in psychotherapy, we treat it as trauma because it is important for us to understand that the implications of being sort of singled out, marginalized, and very much pushed out. Individuals who experience weight stigma may face social isolation, rejection, and discrimination, which can lead to decreased social support and feelings of loneliness. Okay, so let that sink in for a second. There is a lot going on here at the moment. And maybe just think about for you, what was that like to live in a large body? And sometimes the fact that we want to lose weight is because we are trying to escape this stigma, this weight oppression, this body oppression, because we are finding it hard to find ourselves in the society that is serving us currently. Again, when you think about further consequences, we've got self-esteem and body image. So weight stigma negatively, it can impact self-esteem and body image, as I mentioned earlier, and constant exposure to weight-related criticism or societal pressure to conform to certain body ideals can erode one's self-worth and perpetuate a negative body image. So when you think about the lack of clothes in shops, in the high street, that definitely is something that a lot of people find it very hard, because you think that we've got to shrink your body because there is nothing available out there. But actually, you know, a lot of shops choose not to produce larger body size clothing. There is obviously kind of a lot more within the last 5 or so years. However, this is still something that the shops choose to do it deliberately, or big kind of manufacturers. And as you can see, maybe kind of unsuitable chairs in theaters and other public spaces, small kind of spaces in the planes. So all that has been designed for society that lives in thin bodies. And there is obviously kind of something about how do we challenge that? There's a lot more done these days to challenge these of course, I suppose things that have been happening. But we also need to kind of voice our own dissatisfaction with that. When you think about self-esteem and body image, there's obviously that kind of cycle of self-criticism, self-blame, and a distorted relationship with food and exercise, because a lot of us blame ourselves for the fact that we are living in a large body, because, you know, we sometimes are forgetting there's so many different factors why our bodies are the way they are, and we are a lot of the time blaming ourselves that this is my fault, I've done this to myself and I need to be punished. And that way we are starting to play very dangerous games with food as well as exercise, and really usually end up with distorted relationships with these two things. Intersectionality, this is quite of a big word. So weight stigma intersects with other forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, and classism, further exacerbating the negative impact on marginalized individuals. And people who belong to multiple stigmatized groups may experience compounded discrimination and face additional barriers to equitable treatment and opportunities. So let that sink in for a second. So when you think about the body itself, women's body, for example, that became a very political thing over the years. We have started to be seen as, I suppose, the picture of a body. We started to be seen as objects that need to be manipulated, that need to shrink in order to be liked, in order to be seen. And larger bodies are pushed aside. And when you think about the beauty standards over the years, they have changed, and we do not see, I suppose we see more representation out there in terms of larger bodies. However, we still kind of practice that the fact that actually, well, larger bodies are not beautiful. Larger bodies should not be present, and we're trying to eradicate them. But we can't, because these bodies will be out there, but we do need to change our attitudes towards them. And so where do we go from here? So it is important to note that weight stigma is not only harmful, but also ineffective in promoting long-term weight loss and improved health outcomes. Instead, it tends to contribute to further weight gain, unhealthy behaviors, and poor mental health. And efforts are being made to raise awareness about weight stigma and promote body acceptance and inclusivity. And there is so much more done in this country as well, which is quite positive. We've got a lot more professionals who are adding into research, as well as, of course, Amy is going to talk to you about health at every size. And we can see a lot more commissioners, as well as obviously in HAES kind of practitioners and professionals being interested in trying to fight weight stigma, because everybody can see that this approach, weight-centric approach, is not helpful and it's, as I mentioned earlier, it kills people. Education and, of course, advocacy and policy changes are necessary to combat weight stigma and very much create a more inclusive and equitable society for all individuals, regardless of their body size. So addressing weight stigma requires a multifaceted approach, including representation of large bodies within media. Our voices need to be out there as well, not with media, but anywhere that you can obviously educate people when they're commenting on your body, or when you've got maybe kind of you've been sort of pushed away because you're by your doctor because you kind of asked for the right healthcare that you need. So using your voice to be able to kind of challenge those stigmatizing messages. And awareness of risk of this practice can also help people be kinder and more mindful of the hurtful, fatphobic language they use towards themselves or others. And this is kind of a very interesting concept that I introduce people to when I work with them. We are all fatphobic, okay? You know, we are not born fatphobic, okay? But we are. And that itself can sometimes be very challenging for ourselves, because we use that negative language as well as threaten ourselves to make changes. And this is not a good base to start with, because we do need to start with kindness, with seeing ourselves, with being able to offer ourselves respect. So promoting body diversity and challenging societal beauty standards and promoting very much that inclusive healthcare practices are crucial steps towards reducing weight stigma and fostering a more inclusive and supportive society. And that's why we have Health at Every Size. That's why our service wants to talk about this a lot more. And we have been asked over the last year or so by commissioners to include a little bit more of the messages here, because this is the future, and this is something that works. So Amy, if I could invite you in to share your presentation about Health at Every Size. So welcome, Amy. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Milena. So Health at Every Size is also known as HAES. So I'll refer to it as HAES as we go through the presentation. So what actually is Health at Every Size? Next slide, please, Milena. So Health at Every Size is a framework of care, which is an alternative approach to the traditional weight-centric model, where weight is viewed as one-off, if not the most important, markers of health. So instead, HAES addresses physical and mental wellness for everybody, regardless of the size and current health status. And HAES also accepts that body diversity and that there's lots of different body types. It accepts that and supports the idea that whatever your body does as a result to making those health changes is right for your body. Next slide, please. So HAES consists of 5 different principles. So the first principle is weight inclusivity. So accepting and respecting the inherent diversity of body shapes and sizes, and rejecting the idea that there's one specific body type or one specific weight that everybody should have to be healthy. Number 2 is health enhancement. So looking at other factors other than weight. So for example, how is your sleep? What's your well-being like? Is there anything that's affecting that? What are your stress levels like? Or we can also look at biomarkers like cholesterol and blood pressure. But the idea here is we're looking at other things, other factors other than just the weight, the number on those scales. Number 3 is eating for well-being. So this is looking at a health-focused approach to eating. So supporting a positive relationship with food, and instead of looking at meals or foods as a way to lose weight and thinking, instead thinking, is this meal going to satisfy me? Is it going to make me feel full until I next eat? I'm going to feel energized from this meal. Because what tends to happen when we look at food as just a way to lose weight, we tend to eat the same things over and over again, and it'll get really boring. And then not only that, we're less likely to get in everything that we need as part of a healthy, balanced diet. Also, intuitive eating. So I'm not sure if this is a new term to people here today, but listening to our body's hunger cues and our fullness cues. So really paying attention to what our body wants at that time. Eating things that we enjoy, I've mentioned, and no restriction. So not seeing foods as bad, allowing everything into your diet. When we restrict and we tell ourselves we can't have something, we just want it more. So it's allowing yourself to have those things and not seeing different foods as unhealthy or bad. And number 4, respectful care. So this was covered by Milena, but as a recap, so HAES says that health issues need to be taken seriously and compassionately, and not just assuming that an individual needs weight loss. Number 5 is life-enhancing movement. So moving in a way that feels good to you and feels good to your body. So not exercising out of punishment and exercising with the outcome to lose weight. Thinking about it in a different way. So it might be that I want to exercise to improve my fitness or improve my stamina, improve flexibility or learn a new skill, or simply because you enjoy it. It might be your physical activity is going for a walk and a chat with your friend, and that would count. So moving in a way that feels good for you, and that's going to look different for every single person. Next slide, please, Milena. So there's lots of myths out there about HAES, so I'm going to debunk a couple of them today. So the first myth is health at every size means all fat people are healthy. And this is a myth because there's healthy and unhealthy people at all points of the size spectrum. So just because somebody's in a smaller body, it doesn't mean that they're healthy. There's definitely out there a lot of people in small bodies that are unhealthy. And just because somebody's in a larger body doesn't mean that they're unhealthy. Number 2, HAES practitioners will judge you if you want to lose weight. They're anti-weight loss. So HAES doesn't disapprove weight loss. And there will be people that come through our service at ABL that want to lose weight. And that's absolutely fine. I guess it's about having those conversations around why the person wants to lose weight. And then if they do still need to lose weight for whatever reason, is there a way we can incorporate those HAES principles that we looked at on the last slide into their lifestyle? So we're really focusing on improving, but we know that we're improving their health behaviours by doing that, and we're not just focusing on the number on the scales. So yeah, HAES doesn't promote intentional weight loss, but they do have compassion for those that want to lose weight. And then number 3, so it says here, so but surely there must be times when people must lose weight to be healthy. Doesn't HAES overlook this? So we can promote health behaviours and see improvement in somebody's dietary quality, their physical activity levels, and their general well-being without the focus being on weight. So health can be improved in various ways, including the ones that I've just mentioned, and our bodies might change as a result of those changes, and that's okay. But it's not the outcome. That's not the weight on the scale, isn't the sole outcome here. We're focusing on those health changes. Next slide, please, Milena. Okay, so you might be thinking now, this all sounds good and well, but is it effective? What does it look like in the research? Has this been tested compared to the weight-centric, weight-focused approach? And it has. It's been tested. There's plenty of research out there, and the research is growing as well, which is always good. So I've got a couple of different research papers on the screen. The first one is a 2015 research paper, and they summarised that the HAES interventions compared to the weight-centric approach, the participants maintained results, so they were able to keep up, improvements in dietary behaviour, their self-confidence improved as well, alongside the body image, and also with some post-intervention weight reduction, but that wasn't the focus. Another important point which came up in that paper, which I think is worth mentioning, is that they found that individuals in the weight-centric, the weight-focused group, they had a predetermined weight in mind, and if they didn't reach that weight, they felt a bit of a failure. Maybe felt not normal and like they can't be healthy unless they reach that certain weight, and that can lead to disordered eating or exercising excessively, which both of them is not healthy, and that can lead to weight cycling. So weight cycling is where you lose weight, you put weight back on, and then because you put weight back on, you're thinking, right, I need to do what I was doing before, be restrictive, and then lose weight again, and then it's a constant cycle, and that's a dangerous place to be in. It can increase the risk of heart disease, blood pressure, and it's also not good for our metabolic system as well. So it's something that we really need to stay clear on, and they found that taking more of a HAES approach really helps to avoid that weight cycling. And then a more recent review in 2018. So this one was a little bit different in that it looked at 14 different research papers and summarised the findings of all of them. So again, they were looking at the research papers that compared the HAES interventions to the weight-centric model. And what they found is that the HAES groups were effective in improving some heart health outcomes, as well as improving eating behaviour across the participants, their energy intake, and also their diet quality. And they also found major improvements in quality of life and mental health. So looking at the research, it seems that HAES has more to offer than the traditional weight-focused approach to health and well-being. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so where do we go from here? What is the future of HAES? So to adopt a compassionate approach to weight, which helps people to improve their biometrics So things like our blood pressure, cholesterol levels, things that we were talking about earlier, but also our stress levels, how we're sleeping, our general well-being. And this is more and more popular amongst commissioners. As Millen was saying earlier, this is something that commissioners are wanting to see more across programmes. So I picked Doncaster as an example today. So Doncaster City Council are currently using this approach to bring about a healthier society and to tackle weight stigma. So their aim is to create an environment where everyone can pursue their own health goals without judgment or assumptions. So whether someone is in a smaller body or a larger body, everyone can pursue their own health goals. And without the assumption that just because someone's in a large body that they want to lose weight, because they might not want to, and that is okay. And the HAES principles very much outline this new strategy as well. So taking a really gentle, soft approach to nutrition, getting rid of that diet culture mentality, thinking about, so getting rid of thinking about good and bad foods, that foods are clean, just generally not being restrictive. But also moving the body in a way that feels good to you, and picking a type of physical activity which you enjoy, alongside the other principles which were mentioned as well. So there's quite a lot of information on Doncaster, on Doncaster's website around this, and the little picture I've got on the screen on the bottom right hand side I think was a really good example of goals that somebody might want to set on their health improvement journey. So it's under alternative New Year's resolutions, just because sometimes New Year's resolutions can be very, might not be realistic for some people. So they've got some ideas there. So number one, they've put, instead of losing weight, they've crossed out lose weight, and they've put instead get back into swimming because that person used to love it. And then number two, instead of detoxing, getting moving, start a new club. And then number four, treat myself with kindness. So it's just a couple of ideas of HAES friendly goals to set if you are wanting to improve your health. They also have a practice group for health professionals to attend to share best practice on this approach. So individuals that are using the approach, or even if they're not using it at the minute and they want to learn a little bit more about it, they can go and learn a little bit more, and also spread the message as well, around HAES and why people should be using more of this approach, given the research, and to sort of tackle weight stigma, etc. So that's a really good thing for anyone interested in that as well. So the next one, advocating for representation of larger bodies. So do you follow enough people in larger bodies on social media is an example. So this not only supports individuals in larger bodies in the media, but I think it's also really good for our own body image, and making sure what we're seeing on a daily basis, what we're seeing online, is diverse and is more representative. So more people who don't necessarily meet those society's typical beauty standards. Because I guess it can make us feel a bit rubbish if all we're seeing on our feed is people who do meet that perfect body or the society's beauty standards. So trying to get a bit more diversity in the things that we consume on a daily basis would also be really effective for our own body image and body acceptance. Weight inclusive language. So this is something that we're actually having training on at ABL coming up soon, I believe. So this is going to be really good for us to learn and reflect about the language that we're using, and to see how we can be more weight inclusive with our language. So really excited for that one. And it's definitely something that we've had conversations around before. But yeah, that'll be good as well. So Milena did mention the next one, so I won't go into it, but just as a recap, so promoting body diversity, challenging societal beauty standards, and promoting inclusive healthcare practices are all really important steps in reducing weight stigma and creating a more inclusive and supportive society. And lastly there, so learning how to implement HAES approach into curriculums and policies. So we've been talking about HAES at ABL for a while, and there was training last year for staff on HAES by Milena. So we're continuing to learn from the HAES approach to see how we can implement it more into our curriculums, which is going to be really, really great for us, our clients, and yeah, just to continue learning. Next slide, please, Milena. So what can you take away from HAES on your health improvement journey? So number one, assess your own weight bias. Unfortunately, weight stigma is pervasive throughout society, and we all hold some level of prejudice. So interrogate, reflect, amend your own beliefs first. So for example, criticizing your own body weight or size is one, is quite a common one. So have that time to sort of reflect on that. Number two, so if you are on your health improvement journey, focus on health gains. So this is a term that Doncaster City Council use, which I quite like, health gains. So health promoting behaviours. So what can you add into your diet this week? Is there anything, a new recipe you want to try? Is it adding more veg into my evening meal? Is it trying a new fruit? Things like that. What feels good for me in terms of movement? Thinking about what type of physical activity can I do which I enjoy. So those are what we would call health gains, instead of focusing so much on the scales. Number three, accepting and respecting the inherent diversity of body shapes and sizes, and understanding that we can promote health and well-being without focusing on a certain body size and without being a certain body size. And then number four, so biomarkers such as blood pressure, cholesterol, stress levels, well-being, our sleep tell us more about an individual's health than weight does. So having to think about that and reflecting on it. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we've also put together some resources. So there's some podcasts here, blogs, a blog on intuitive eating. So I mentioned that earlier around hunger and fullness cues, but there's definitely more to it than that. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about it, there's a really good blog there. Some really great websites as well, which discuss the HAES approach. And there's a Instagram handle there as well for somebody who is very body positive. So if you're thinking that my feed is very much one body type and I want to add a little bit more diversity, I would definitely recommend that Instagram page. And there's also a link there for CPD for any health professionals which might be interested in learning a little bit more. And if you're interested in incorporating this approach into your practice, you can have a look at that as well. And then we've also got some recommended books here. So the first one, Health at Every Size, written by Lindo Bacon. Food Isn't Medicine, Fat is a Feminist, and also You Are Not a Before Picture, how to finally make peace with your body. So very much about body acceptance and body positivity, that one. So if you're interested in reading this for you, I definitely recommend having a look into these. And that is everything from me. What time are we on, Milena?
It's just 18:51. So thank you, Amy, for obviously kind of really good introduction to HAES, and just kind of last words for me in terms of the approach and how we kind of are learning to perhaps, you know, have those conversations as well, and understand, obviously, kind of the impact of kind of very weight-centric approach to health and weight loss itself. And I think this is what we are trying to do for all of you as well, to introduce you to this much more of an alternative, because we feel like you've got to know this. A lot of the time we hear quite conflicting messages, very much, you know, stigmatizing messages from different diet plans, different diet programs as well. And we just want to reassure that there is a different way to approach your health, your weight, and you deserve a better care, and we want to provide that for you, definitely in ABL, and we hope to be an example for other services as well. So thank you for coming in today. I'm quite conscious of time as well. Probably won't have enough time to answer all the questions, but we have all the questions and we'll collect them, and we'll try to obviously kind of respond to them as we kind of carry on with our week as well. So thank you for coming in, and if you have any other questions, pop them on. I will obviously kind of get back to you as well. Okay, so thank you, and thank you, Amy, for your webinar.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot. I'll be closing the session. Have a nice evening, everyone.